I'm Joel Baird, the General Manager of Missoula Community Access Television, inviting you to an edition of City Access. Today we're going to talk about community development funds, and we're going to talk about Home Investment Partnership Program with Mike Barton. Mike Barton's a grants administrator with the Office of Planning and Grants for the City of Missoula. Mike, thanks for coming over.
Oh, thank you.
And thanks for appreciating my set and helping me with my modifications. We're taping this program in September of 2003. And Mike, how long will this information be pretty vital to people? Because we'll probably rerun it and stuff. I don't want people to get the impression when we're rerunning it that they're looking at old stuff, even though we're talking about what's happening in September of 2000.
Well, we've just announced an opportunity for community groups to apply to the city for the funds that we have, both in community development and the Home Investment Partnerships Program. That window, if you will, for competitive applications for community development will stretch until November 15th, and then for the home program it will stretch on into December, and I think you probably
have the date right here. Duh. Right, so we should tell people who are watching, we want to give them an overview of what we're talking about. And we rehearse this a little bit, just so people know the entities that are going to apply to this money to the Office of Planning and Grants, right? They have to be nonprofit organizations. Is that true?
For the most part. They don't necessarily have to be nonprofits, but what we found is historically it's mostly nonprofits who participate in the programs that benefit low-income folks. We would also consider and have considered applications from for-profit entities who are doing things like creating jobs for lower-income folks. Okay. So as a for instance, we've made at least one business loan to an entity that had committed to creating a certain number of jobs and accepting applications from target groups that we identified to come in and get those like positions.
Developmentally disabled or people on job training programs, things like that.
This is primarily income driven.
Okay.
So that, for instance, a family of four with income of about $36,000 falls under the HUD income guideline and would qualify for the programs that we're talking about. Now, in some instances, a group might decide to target a lower and more specific income range.
Right.
So that, for instance, we've done housing development for agencies that are targeting seniors with incomes below 50% of the median, right, or even down as low as 30% of the median.
So for folks watching, I want to give them a headline. Sure. The City of Missoula is seeking applications from, in the main, nonprofit groups and sometimes for-profit groups to apply for funds that will be available for projects that are going to help low-income families and individuals,
right. Yes.
in the specific areas of jobs and housing.
Jobs, housing, we can also participate in some public facilities, and as two different for instances there, we've assisted a lot of people in the past few years connecting to sewer. In those areas where the city has gone out and laid new sewer lines, there are a lot of people in some of those neighborhoods, and I'm thinking particularly now of East Reserve Street, who weren't able to afford either the participation in the capital cost for the line or the cost to connect to the system.
Once it's there.
Right. And so what we've been able to do in that area is go in, and I think we've helped out, it's close to 90 households with both the SID portion of that and with the connection, getting a contractor, digging the line to the house. That's one type of public facility improvement that we can do. We've also helped some public agencies with their buildings. For instance, we're going to help out with the Art Museum as they do their remodel to make that building accessible to people with disabilities.
Right now they have a ramp outside, right? Yeah. Which is okay, but you mean you're going to help them?
It's barely okay.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And they'll put in a new, they'll have a new foyer, a new entryway in the Art Museum. It's going to have accessible restrooms, an elevator, a larger open space there as you come in.
So that's
And
an
we'll
example like of a nonprofit.
Yes.
And you wouldn't necessarily think of as being associated with the low income and so on, but that a nonprofit that's applied for a community development block grant
Mm-hmm.
and is being assisted by the Office of Planning and Grants with this money. So what do people do? I mean, I bet you have contact info. Oh, now this is important for folks that are watching and they've caught our drift, right? And they understand what's going on. So if someone is anticipating opening a business and maybe that business is going to employ low-income
Sure.
people, if someone is in the human services area, and they may know about this, of course, because they're in the pipeline, but you never
Sure.
know. There are folks out there that would not know. The Office of Planning and Grants is offering an application workshop on Wednesday, September 24th for people that want to learn more about
Yeah.
this program to get money to do this stuff.
And how to go through the process,
Right.
and what particular bells and whistles that they have to bring in an application. That's part of it, yeah.
Right. And this workshop is going to be Wednesday, September 24th at 10 a.m. No, yes, at 10 a.m. until noon. So it's a 2-hour meeting at the large meeting room at the City County Library, which is 301 East Main. And I see some city phone numbers have changed, the prefix anyway. So to contact you and learn more information about the program, people are to call 258, and we'll put this up.
Great.
258-3874, and you talk to you, Mike Barton, about it.
And if I see it on the screen, then I'll remember it too, because it's,
Right.
having your phone number changed is the worst thing that can happen to a bureaucrat.
At a long time. And then we'll also put up your email address so
Okay.
people could email. So, okay, we've done that part.
Okay.
Let's go into a little more detail. Because I see here, like in the press release, it says the city has reserved $295,000 of available funds. And how much money are we talking about altogether?
We'll make available about $2 million, and
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
no joke.
it's a sizable contribution. It becomes a really important resource in that a lot of the money that we spend is matched with other funding. It becomes kind of the gap financing that folks use to push their project over the top finally.
So that might be
So-
one thing you're looking for in applicants, people that have an idea, have a source of funding to undertake a project they
Sure.
want to do, but they need a little bridge money to get there.
Yeah, let me give you a few for instances, or a general for instance. I guess we've, in the 5 years that the city's administered Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG part of this, about $1 million has gone into several different projects that will create new housing units. A new housing unit in this community now, whether, depending on whether it's an apartment or a single family detached residence, might cost anywhere between $80,000 and $130,000. We are involved with the creation of about 150 units through various pieces of investment. Our average investment in developing new housing is about $6,300 a unit.
Oh, wow.
So
So
in
that's
some-
spread. That is
Right.
spread.
In some instances, in fact, in at least 3 or 4 cases that I can think of, we've participated in the acquisition of land, where a group, once they have the land under control, has then been able to go out and get financing or to get other grant funds or low interest loans to develop housing that's then rented or sold to folks with lower or moderate incomes.
So you're really leveraging a situation where you're
Absolutely.
kind of
Yes.
starting the ball rolling. So
And that's
almost
that's one of the most attractive
right.
features that an applicant can come forward with, is to say, okay, for instance, we've got $90,000 of the $100,000 we need per unit. If we can get this much more,
We're
we
ready
can
to
then
go.
take it forward. Yes.
Right. It's like the definition of cool, the minimum effort for maximum result.
Well, it's definitely cool. I mean,
Right.
regardless of your definition, it's
It is totally cool to get a lot done with the little resources. And we talked a little before we taped about where the money's coming from.
Mhm.
People watching might be like, $2 million? Did that come out of my pocket? Well, probably,
Yes.
but let's
Yes,
describe how it came out of their pocket and how it made its way back to Missoula.
Okay, Community Development Block Grant is one of the first federal block grant programs. It replaced model cities and urban renewal and those sorts of programs that were in housing and urban development early on. And what it did was to make available large amounts of money to primarily larger cities and urban counties for community development work. Until 1998, the city of Missoula, like the county and most Montana communities, competed for this money because part of it was set aside for what were called entitlement communities, the communities that receive the money just by virtue of their size or their incidence of poverty or bad housing, versus all the other communities, especially the smaller communities like we have in Montana. So there, as I said, there were the two separate pots really, an entitlement pot and a competitive pot. For years, the state of Montana has administered that competitive pot of money, and Missoula participated in that competitively for years. But in '98, Missoula reached the threshold of what's called Metropolitan Statistical Area, MSA, and started receiving its own allocation. I think the first year was $684,000.
Okay, Mike, in that mix, you mentioned, to become the entitlement community, it might be a sheer matter of size.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a function of the level of poverty that census indicate or what have you. And it might be the level of housing opportunity, how difficult it would be for low-income people to acquire, safe and decent housing. So where did Missoula fall in there? Was it just numbers? Was it a lot of poverty? Was it a lot of inaffordability? Some kind of mixture?
No one knows how the federal government does the calculation that decides who the grantee is. But to be more responsive, it seems to me, and I've been working with this for about 20 years, that the main driver is population. So that as Missoula's population has grown, it's come up to the threshold clearly for CDBG. That's 50,000 in the city, and we've reached that. But in looking at those other factors, and just recently the city became the recipient of home funds as well. Home stands for Home Investment Partnerships Program, and it's a housing development program out of HUD.
So it's a federal program again, too.
And again, one that, like CDBG, where the state has administered a competitive pot for most Montana communities, two other communities receive an entitlement allocation. Now Missoula becomes the third, along with Billings and Great Falls. When the city became eligible for that, again, while population is the primary driver, the lack of affordable housing in Montana, or in Missoula in particular, kicked Missoula into a slightly higher category that pushed us over the threshold that allowed us to get the allocation.
Of the home. So that the difficulty of people getting affordable housing in Missoula actually registered at a federal level, and relief is forthcoming.
And in fact, normally HUD requires that any participants in the home program bring forward at least 25% in funds that they raise for their own match of the home funds. Because of the low incidence, the unavailability of affordable housing here in Missoula, that requirement's cut in half for people initiating projects here.
Oh, so there is some hope for people that are having a hard time looking. But now, individuals, let's say individuals watching this program, they are not going to individually apply to the Office of Planning and Grants, the City of Missoula. There's going to be interim organizations that are looking out for the needs of low-income families and individuals, and they're going to apply.
Yes.
So, I mean, what are some instances, recent projects of groups doing just that, and that people are getting into affordable housing?
Since the program started, we've funded the Missoula Housing Corporation, which is it's an arm or kind of a consortium of other groups that try to bring affordable home ownership opportunities to lower income folks here. through that, we've been able to, through the Missoula Housing Corporation, we've been able to provide second mortgages to first-time home buyers, and probably about 50 people have been able to achieve ownership through that Missoula Housing Corporation project. Similarly, Homeward has come into the city, and the city has partnered with that organization to buy a piece of ground out, out just west of Reserve Street, where Homeward will develop, I think, 30 affordable housing units. Again, aiming at a particular economic niche below the area median income. The Human Resource Council, as another example, has come in and received funds to rehabilitate homes for lower income owner occupants.
Right. Like they might do that energy program where they'll
Sure.
check the house and
Yes.
see how energy efficient it is, and then try to make a low-cost renovation to people living there so they can hold on to their house and meet their heat bill, for instance. Gosh, okay, what else can we say about it? We know that, organizations, I mean, how does OPG has made this press release, this program, I guess, is one attempt to get people aware of it. And a lot of the organizations that would apply, you feel are in the pipeline. Like they kind of know about it, although this workshop coming up on September 24th, that's open to anyone interested in how this works, right? They don't need necessarily to be affiliated. If they want to do volunteer work, making affordable housing in the city, it might be good for them to go to it.
In fact, there's a second part to that, to the activity on the 24th, because in the afternoon what we'll do is hold a meeting to talk about the city's consolidated plan. HUD requires that the city do a 5-year plan to generally describe how it will spend the HUD resources, and in these cases, CDBG and home. What we'll do in the afternoon at the same place, at the library, in the meeting room there, from 1 to 4, or whenever, and we do this on an ongoing basis, but we'll take suggestions from the groups who are in the pipeline and from individuals, other agencies, about what activities they'd like to see the city funding with this money. Right. So we're interested in finding out where community groups see a need for housing, or for job training, or for extension of sewer and things like this that these programs can underwrite.
Yeah, so this, I mean, it's interesting to me to think of, and I don't often think, a lot of people, I think, when they think of the Office of Planning and Grants, they come into contact with it because they want to build something.
Sure.
Because they want to change something on their house, because they're not happy with what's going on down the street, or this kind of thing in terms of traffic or traffic mitigation. I know that goes into engineering. But I don't often think of Office of Planning and Grants as like a human service agency. I do think a Human Resource Council or the Poverello Center or Salve, any number of other organizations. But this
and they're definitely the front line.
Right.
I mean, what we've become is somewhat of a grantor, and in some cases a pass-through for funds to help these folks do their work better or do more. And we've also participated in a lot of the efforts to coordinate what the various human service and community development agencies do in the community, because I think what we found is that insofar as we collaborate and plan for meeting identified needs, that we do a lot better than we would as just independent agencies running off to
kind of knowing what everybody else is doing. They could kind of put together a better package of service for people that need it. Well, Mike, who decides? You say like OPG then is administering these grants. So they used to be competitive, at a statewide level. Now they're competitive, I guess, at a citywide level. Is there a volunteer board that reads applications and does site investigation, or?
Staff will do a review, and make recommendations, but the ultimate decision rests with council, the city council.
Oh, interesting.
So usually,
so they award the CDBG, right? The Community Development Block Grant.
Yes, usually late in January, early in February.
Right.
Like I think we said before, the applications for CDBG come due in November.
The 15th or
The,
something.
yeah, and the staff will usually get a series of recommendations to City Council late in December, early in January, and then it starts into a public process where Council will hold a hearing or hearings to get input on the recommendations and on the ultimate awards.
Right.
Usually, then we try to be under contract with our grantees by the 1st of April.
So they're out there doing what
Yeah.
they proposed
Yes.
to do, kind of a thing. All right. Well, is there anything we didn't cover in our discussion?
I'm sure there's lots of things we
I
didn't
guess
cover,
we did.
but people get
I
to
had a
come to the
question.
meetings.
That's right. Where does the block come from? You know, when I would hear about it covering city council, I
Yes.
always hear the CDBG, you know, and
Yes.
that already knocked me for a loop. Like, you know, because for a lot of people, sometimes city government, it's like any tech thing. You know, we could sit around talking about the SID and the CDBG, you know, coming out of OPG on 913 or whatever. And, you know, your brain just starts like, what are they talking about? You know, but it's the same, you know, if you're talking about copy machines or technical television
Yeah.
equipment, you know. But the community development block grant, I always thought, oh, people are going to have a block party. Or, you know, it was this group, it was this community group. They all lived somewhere, because sometimes it would be paired with the SID, which is the Special Improvement District.
Okay.
But I'm just going to recap that for people watching, like, what the heck are these guys talking
Sure.
about? The city might make a special improvement district and say, you know what, you guys are all on septic tank and you got a sewer for the benefit of the whole city. And they're like, well, we don't have the money to sewer. You know, you're putting a burden on us. That's where a community development block grant can bring relief to people that are suffering under a special improvement district. But anyway.
But block.
Yeah, where does that block come
Block
from?
has to do with the whole federal notion of the way money goes out to states and local governments. So block grants typically replace categorical grants.
Okay.
So back in the 60s, communities would write competitive applications for things like model cities or urban renewal, and they would have to be very specific about what they intended to do. And the federal government, HUD, would look at their applications and decide what it would and wouldn't fund, and then would make money available to do a very specific project. In the 70s and since, the federal government has, this is, you know, it's waxed and waned, but for the most part, what the federal government has attempted to do in many agencies is to simply give the state or local governments a block of funds that covers a whole range of activities. So the city or the state can then pick and choose what it would like to do, and assuming it's eligible activity under the broad umbrella of the program, the city just undertakes that activity. It doesn't have to go and get the specific activity blessed by higher, by higher levels of government.
So it's about more local control, essentially.
Yes.
They're kind of saying it's kind of a decentralization of,
it is.
of supervision.
Keep in mind, too, though, I have to say, because it becomes such a political issue, that block grant has also been a way for the federal government to get out from under responsibilities perceived as belonging to it.
Okay.
So that, for instance, in the federal government in cases will say, we will block grant this particular fund, you know, and we'll simply turn it over to the states and cities. At that point, the states and cities can't anticipate a lot of change in what it gets. So while the problem that it's intended to address may be on the increase, federal funds may not increase to match that.
Oh, I see.
And it's become kind of a two-edged sword for communities, because in many instances, like you say, it does provide a lot more flexibility, but over time, it's been a way for the federal government to decrease its financial commitment to local governments.
Gotcha. And that is a tough one. That's for the real insiders watching to debate among themselves,
Indeed,
too.
indeed.
Well, Mike, thanks so much for coming by, taking the time out. I'm going to remind people about what we were talking about. Community Development Block Grant Funds available from the City of Missoula Office of Planning and Grants. If you are an individual watching this show and you're interested in social services in Missoula, of course, if you're an organization you don't already know, heck, you should. So I'm going to put Mike's contact number up again. That's 258-3874. You'll be calling Mike Barton, Grants Administrator in the Office of Planning and Grants, City of Missoula. And you can come to a meeting on Wednesday, September 24th, 10 a.m. at the Missoula County, City County Library. It's at 301 East Main Street. If you're watching this program after that, don't panic, because we're still going to run it, because the deadline for these programs, one is November 15th for the community block grants, the other is December 15th for the home awards.
That's true.
Okay, so thank you all for watching this edition of City Access. For Missoula Community Access Television, I'm Joel Baird. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.